Don't be afraid of the retrogrades. Hi, I'm the Warrior Witch and you can call me Nike. Today's video is going to be a little bit more just straight information based. So if you guys just want to have it on in the background to listen to, you don't really have to pay attention to any visual cues or any infographics that I might put up, because it's pretty much just going to be me talking about retrogrades, specifically Mercury retrograde, because it's coming up fast and it's the one that we usually have to worry about the most. So let's talk about it. So we're going to start with what is a retrograde in general. In astrology, retrogrades are when planets appear to be moving backwards from our position on the Earth. And this doesn't mean that a planet is actually moving backward in its orbit, because it's just not a thing that's going to happen. Science. But how we see it from here on Earth, it's going to be very different, and it's relative to our position based on where we are compared to it and where it is compared to the sun and where both of our orbits sit. And so about 3 times a year, Mercury appears to slow down, stop, and then start moving backwards in its orbit relative to how we see it. So keep in mind, it's not actually moving backwards, but it appears to be moving backwards to us. So the energy of that planet will change. Every planetary body in our solar system, aside from the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun, all retrograde. So every single one of the planets that we use in astrology all goes into retrograde. We've had quite a lot this year. Remember how I said that I have that astrology app on my phone? It is so handy for this. It's so nice. I have little bars over the planets to let you know when they're retrograde, so you don't have to look for anything. It's super obvious. It's great. Yes, so we're still in the middle of Mars retrograde, and Neptune and Uranus are still retrograde as well. We had pretty much all of the outer planets retrograde at some point this year. Many of them were together, so that was fun for everybody. So yeah, a lot of the planets will retrograde. And this Mercury retrograde goes from about the 14th of October until about the 2nd of November, which is pretty much all leading up to the election, which is a whole different story. But we're just gonna talk about the dates on the calendar as if it was any other year. But it happens about 3 times a year for around a month every time, 3 or 4 weeks, depending. October 13th or 14th until November 2nd or 3rd-ish. And it'll depend on where you are in the world and what place you go to for the exact timing relative to where you are, but those are the dates that we're going with. It's about 2 or 3 weeks. You might be asking, what does a retrograde do to us? Why do we care about it so much? Well, that's going to depend on the planet. So Mars retrograde and Venus retrograde are going to look very, very different from a Mercury retrograde. So for example, Venus retrograde, you might not want to do anything regarding your appearance. You might want to be very careful when it comes to your relationships and how you are interacting with your partner. You might also want to be careful with your money, because Venus is also a ruler of Taurus, which is the ruler of the 2nd house, which deals with values and valuables. So Mercury rules over communication, travel, and technology. So those are all the things that we want to be careful with. How a retrograde affects people is, in some senses, either that certain things will be susceptible to changes or imbalances, or they might just straight up not work as well as you want them to. For example, when we say that during a Mercury retrograde you want to be careful with travel, we mean that you may have to factor in delays, or your plans may get canceled, or you might face a lot more traffic. You might end up having car troubles. You want to make sure that with technology, you back up the things that you're working on. So to all you artists out there, during October 13th through November 3rd, make sure you are saving often, like even more often than you already do. Save your work. If you're writing a paper, save as often as possible. Have backups. If you have, for example, a drive, like an external hard drive, like I do for your work, double back up your stuff. Don't just have it on your computer, have it on that hard drive, and whatever you're working on actively, maybe have it saved somewhere else as well. Save your stuff onto a cloud drive somewhere, like Google Drive, like I do. And since it rules communication, it means that you have to be careful of miscommunications a lot more. It means that you may need to watch your words and be careful that you are not being misinterpreted, and you may need to take a moment to slow down to understand what other people are trying to say to you, because we may be more likely to jump to conclusions. We're still in the middle of Mars retrograde. And with us being still in a Mars retrograde, which rules over like actions and being impulsive, especially because Mars is in Aries, we have to be careful with miscommunications and actions that go with them. So if you think that you might be hearing something in a way that makes you upset, don't jump on it too hard. Take a breath, relax, and step back from it. So are retrogrades just supposed to be all bad? Are we just supposed to suffer anytime that these things come around? Is there nothing that we can do? Or, you know, you might be asking, well, I still have to drive places, I still have to use my phone, I have to take tests, especially if you're in school, I have to use my phone, I have to make phone calls. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Just hide myself in a hole for a month? It's not possible. And you're right, it's really not feasible or realistic to tell people that you just gotta go into a cave and hide for 3 weeks, or however long the retrograde of whatever planet's gonna last. The reality is we just have to be aware that they're happening, and we have to be aware that we have to shift a bit of what we're doing while we're doing it. So, like I was mentioning earlier, being extra careful, planning ahead, making sure that you have backup plans, or just straight backups of files. I really hope it's saved. God, wouldn't that be funny if on Mercury Retrograde Shadow I was gonna lose my file. Please save. The basics is we plan ahead and we're just extra careful in the realm of whatever planet that rules to make sure that we're not getting too caught up by it. And certain things are gonna be unavoidable. Man, last Mercury Retrograde got me good. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. That's why it was important for me to plan ahead. What do we do? What's the point? Are we just supposed to suffer the whole time? No. Retrogrades are meant to be things that help us rest and reflect on those realms. Instead of working with the active energies of it, trying to communicate and go places and do things during Mercury and Mars retrogrades, we're supposed to reflect on the ways that we communicate, on the ways that we do things, on our actions and our words, on our plans. We're supposed to look at those things and reevaluate. It's the rule of rees, right? We're supposed to really look at what we're doing in that realm and see what serves us and what doesn't. We're not supposed to be trying to push through it really hard and try to just force our way past it, because that's what ends up screwing you half the time. If I'm gonna face a lot of traffic, if I'm gonna have issues with my camera not saving my film, if I'm gonna have my phone dying for no reason, if my files are not going to be working or they get corrupted out of nowhere, I have to make sure that I'm taking the responsibility to back them up and take the proper precautions, because if I'm not, that's when I screw myself over. If I lose this really important file, I have to make sure that I have backups of the files, that I'm ready to re-record if I have to, if the first file doesn't work well. I have to make sure that I'm taking the proper steps and responsibilities to make sure I'm avoiding as many consequences as possible, and I'm not trying to force my way through it by doing too many new things. During retrogrades, especially Mercury retrograde, I try to focus more on what I'm learning rather than doing. So instead of trying to do a new type of spell work, instead of trying to practice a new skill, I'm instead reinforcing what I already know or trying to learn new things about it without practicing those things yet. I stay in the learning and research phase, or I'm going back to old material that I want to learn a little bit deeper on. And so I'm taking in the information, I'm still working with the energy, but I'm making sure to keep myself in the rest and reflect phase of it. I'm trying to work with the energies that it's trying to encourage, because the planets aren't trying to hurt you, they're not out to get you. We're learning a lesson with this. Just like any circumstance in our life, just like many of the ups and downs, there is often a lesson that can be taken from it, whether it's the intentional reason behind it or not, depending on your philosophy. The planets are just doing what they're doing, and the lessons that we take from them is up to us. You can decide that the planets are against you and every Mercury retrograde is going to be really terrible and your life's going to suck every time, or you can take that time to try to work with the energy. It's all about balance. You can't be go, go, go all the time. There has to be moments where you're pushing forward and then you're pulling back, like an ocean wave. You're going in and out. Plus, if you were just pushing yourself to go through new information and learning and doing new things all the time, you would just get burnt out really easily, which I've talked about before. I have a spiritual burnout video that I've talked about in the past. So, you know, this is a good time to consider some of that. During this Mercury retrograde, I tend to do a lot more studying. I'm currently working through Buckland's book of Spirit Communications. I have been reading slowly but surely through Holistic Tarot, which I adore. Oh, look at all the pages. And here and there, I'm going through Keeping Her Keys, because I work with Hecate, and so it has things that you do every month on the new moons. So when the new moon comes around, which is coming soon in a couple days, I believe it'll be during Mercury retrograde, but I'll have to double check my dates. But I intend to go through some of these and just make sure that I'm really focusing on the inner work that it takes. Some people might do some shadow work because it would be a good time for inner communication versus outer communication. Might be a good idea. I also have my shadow work video right here. Haha, got it right that time. And I otherwise just plan to kind of keep it chill. I have school that I have to deal with and work I have to drive to and videos I gotta make and posts I have to make for my online media presence. So, you know, my life isn't going to completely stop, but I'm making sure that I'm planning carefully and I'm planning ahead and I'm not just impulsively posting something whenever I feel like it. I'm really thinking about how my words are going to be understood, how my messages are going to come across, and if it is the best thing for me to be posting at that moment, and I really think on it. And if you don't want to risk any of it, you can just take some time off. There's nothing wrong with that. If you have the ability to take time off from certain aspects of your life, then do it. And my general summary of this would be just don't be afraid of retrogrades. They're not out to get you. Life is all about ebb and flow. It's about balance. It's about equaling the scales, and you can't have too much of one thing or another. So you can't have too much of go, go, go without taking some time off to just enjoy it and just to, you know, be yourself, enjoy your hobbies. If you've been pushing really, really hard at something recently, now would be a great time to take a step back. You may have already been experiencing some of Mercury retrograde's energy anyway. So retrogrades also have a shadow period, and it's before the planet fully parks itself and then starts to move backward. It's where it slows down and speeds back up on either end of that backwards movement. So the planet's trucking along and then it hits that shadow period and really just boom. Don't mind my sound effects. So this is when it stations. So when we talk about stationing direct or stationing retrograde, stationing is when it comes to a full and complete stop. So stations, starts moving backwards again, and then it hits the end of the retrograde, and it stations direct, and then we hit the post-retrograde shadow period where it's starting to speed back up to its usual pace, and then it continues on as it ever does. And we'll have that 3 times a year. If you guys have any strategies that you use during retrogrades, especially Mercury retrograde since it comes around so often, leave it down below, let's talk about it. I would love to hear the things that you guys like to do during those retrogrades, or even just the ways that you prepare during retrogrades. Or I guess, before retrogrades. Both. If you want to find more of me, you can interact with me on my hashtag WarriorWitchCoven on Instagram. I try to check it here and there, and sometimes I share the work that's in there. If you want to follow me, I'm on pretty much everything as Warrior Witch Nike, or on Twitter as Warrior Witch N, because Twitter's mean and doesn't have longer names. I also have my website, so if you want to read some of my longer form thoughts and some of the articles, or if you want to see transcripts, basically, of some of my works, like my Money Bowl spell, I have that here. And if you guys want to subscribe, if you aren't already, I would appreciate that. I think I make pretty cool content, and I'm a pretty cool person. So, you know, stick around, see what's going on. And that's all I've got for you guys this week. So I'll see you around, and blessed be. I really hope that first file saved, because if it didn't, I'll be really sad.